wise king never seeks out war. But he must always be ready for it.
You're nothing but a boy, trying to prove himself a man.
Why have you done this?
To prove to Father that I am a worthy son.
There is no stopping it. There is only the war.
So be it.
You betray me, and I will kill you.
When do we start?
You still don't trust me, brother?
Would you?
No, I wouldn't.
I'm ready, Father. So am I.
Only one of you can ascend to the throne, but both of you were born to be kings.
If you look at the majority of the Marvel characters, they're all human, and they're all relatable, and they all have flaws. And then you have Thor, who's the prince of a cosmic realm, literally at the top of the food chain of the entire universe. And Loki, his rogue brother, who feels like he was destined to be king. Part of the fun of the journey is not just the spectacle, it's not just the roller coaster physically, but you need some touch points emotionally.
In the case of Thor, it's that journey of humility. He starts out with powers. He's a very powerful guy to begin with.
Next,
It's how to channel that, how to use that, how to dedicate himself to Earth.
the Earth is under my protection, Loki.
And you're doing a marvelous job with that.
In the first film, he came down a petulant prince. He returned a good son. He kind of became a warrior that he needed to be.
You could have killed them all with your bare hands.
I've changed.
So have I.
I kind of look at these films as the trilogy. It's from the innocent boy who discovered a dark truth, who tried to get his life back through the wickedest of ways, and his fall from grace.
You were made to be ruled.
As Thor rose to become the hero, Loki descended to become the villain.
Look at this! Look around you! You think this madness will end with your rule?
It's too late. It's too late to stop it.
No. We can. Together.
Even though your protagonist has to have his own arc, they're brothers, they have a relationship, but in the end, because of the agenda of Loki, it can never be fully realized.
One of the hardest casting processes was the first Thor. For Thor in particular, you look at him in the comic, you'd have to cast the biggest wrestler that existed or the biggest bodybuilder, and we wanted to cast the best actor. And luckily with Hemsworth, you get both. You get somebody who is tremendously charismatic, who gave 2 or 3 or 4 great auditions, and who has the frame. He got much bigger than we ever thought he would, but it's that kind of discipline, that kind of commitment that makes him a great actor.
Brother, whatever I have done to wrong you, I am truly sorry. But these people are innocent. Taking their lives will gain you nothing. So take mine.
I remember watching the test and just closing my eyes and hearing Chris speak. I said, that's Thor. You could hear it in his voice. He sounded like the young prince who would be king.
War is coming whether we want it or not, and when it does, I'm ready to fight it. I'm ready to win it. What's happened? Tell me, is it Jotunheim? Let me explain to Father.
Father is dead.
What?
The burden of the throne has fallen to me now.
We always were putting our chips on Loki. We believed in him as a character. Had Tom not brought him to life in a way the audience responded to, it probably wouldn't have gone anywhere.
You know, at first, Tom was up for Thor. He trained, he came in, he was ripped, you know, he was swinging the hammer in the ring. He did a tremendous job, but he wasn't Thor. From the moment he came in and read, though, he was Loki.
You're my son. I wanted only to protect you from the truth.
What, because I'm the monster that parents tell their children about at night? You know, it all makes sense now why you favored Thor all these years. Because no matter how much you claim to love me, you could never have a frost giant sitting on the throne of Asgard.
The audience responds so strongly to Tom. We couldn't have been happier.
He finds so much humor in his evil, and he and Chris have a great rapport with each other. They've got sort of a brotherly thing. It's fun to be around.
It's great seeing actors so committed to a role. They believe that they're playing that role, that they are Thor, that they are Loki. And I think when they believe, we believe.
I love playing the character. You know, the trick is each time to find new ways to make the character have some sort of advance or growth from the last one. I mean, the first film, Thor, was, began pretty much as a young, spoiled teenager, and was about to take on the throne and be king. And then his father realizes that, he's not quite mature enough to do that. His priorities are in the wrong places, full of ego and attitude.
You are unworthy of these realms. You're unworthy of your title! You're unworthy of the loved ones you have betrayed.
He's stripped of his costume, he's stripped of his powers, and then once he gets banished to Earth, you have the fun of seeing this character trying to relate to a new world, which of course is our world.
I need a horse.
We don't have horses, just dogs, cats, birds.
And give me one of those large enough to ride.
Again, it is this story of brothers. They're on a parallel journey. Loki is someone who, I think, eventually accepted the fact that he'll always play second fiddle. He'll never get the chance to rule. But the banishment allows an opportunity that he long forgot and gave up on. And his desire to be his brother's equal takes hold of him.
Loki, as audiences have come to understand him, is a damaged psychopath. He, in the first film, was undergoing an experience of tragic exile, understanding that his life was a lie, that he was adopted, betrayed, and lied to.
Am I cursed?
No.
What am I?
You're my son.
What more than that?
Had Odin had more faith in Loki and maybe been more honest with his sons, the secrets he was forced to keep could have avoided the destruction of his family and the falling out of his two sons, who started as two loving brothers but end as the worst of enemies.
I could have done it, Father! I could have done it! For you! For all of us!
No, Loki.
Loki, no. No!
At the very end of that film, the Thor film, you see him literally break away from his past, from his family, and you realize any conscience that he had has been burned out of him. What Ken really brought to the forefront in the first film was family, was sibling rivalry taken to the extreme. We continue that. That's what Avengers was about as well.
We were raised together. We played together. We fought together. Do you remember none of that?
I remember a shadow. Living in the shade of your greatness.
Thor, more than any of the other characters, went through a lot in the Avengers. The entire film was about him having to come to Earth to get his rogue brother back. We meet a Loki at the beginning of Avengers that is intent on conquering the planet. His brother has a throne, his real father had a throne, his adopted father had a throne. He wants a throne.
You were cast out, defeated. I was a king, the rightful king of Asgard. Betrayed.
Loki's path was very clear. He's the one in the comics that brought the team together. In our cinematic universe, he was also going to be the one that brought the Avengers together.
A lot of time was spent building up the threat, building up the character, showing how strong and dangerous he was. And at the end of the day, I think, the thing that makes it work is Tom. He breathes a lot of life into Loki. In Thor, he had a very poignant and, I thought, beautifully realized arc. In this, he's past that. You can still see hints of it. You can still see the resentments and the vulnerability and the big brother issues and all that stuff. But he's also gone, to a happier place.
In Avengers, all of that emotional damage calcified into pure, cold-blooded evil. He simply wanted to divide and rule and destroy anything that got in the way.
I've seen worlds you've never known about. I have grown, Odin's son, in my exile. I have seen the true power of the Tesseract, and when I wield it...
Who showed you this power? Who controls the would-be king?
I am a king!
Not here! You give up the Tesseract! You give up this poisonous dream! You come home
How far, must relationship between brothers degrade to the point where there's no coming back from it? After the events of Avengers, you're pretty close to that point. Thor wants nothing to do with his brother. He doesn't consider him his brother anymore. So Thor, at the end of that film, at the end of Avengers, takes him back to Asgard. And what's great, when you have continuity like we do, is that in this film, you get to see what happens next.
And what of Thor? You'll make that witless oaf king while I rot in chains.
Thor must strive to undo the damage you have done. He will bring order to the Nine Realms, and then, yes, he will be king.
For Thor, he really is picking up from Avengers with the same questions he still has about his brother, about why and how did they end up here and what happened to their relationship.
And you should know that when we fought each other in the past, I did so with a glimmer of hope that my brother was still in there somewhere.
All of these family dynamics just feel like larger incarnations of very truthful human shapes. Every family bumps heads occasionally, and this family in Asgard is no different.
In Thor 1, more than anything in the world, he wants that throne, and he was not ready to be on the throne. Now we have a different Thor, a more mature Thor, a more clear-thinking person, and he doesn't really want it.
He's trying to do the right thing by his father, by the fact that his father had told him that you will be king. It is time, but he doesn't feel he's ready, although he does want to protect Asgard. He just doesn't want to do it from the throne.
It's a darker transition into adulthood for Thor and him becoming king, and the darker side of growing up. It becomes very political about what the people of Asgard and the universe need to know versus what they want to know. I think he starts to see the shadier side of the royal family.
Thor and Loki are interesting because their fathers so completely screwed up their childhood. You don't tell two boys that they're both meant to be king, but only one will do it.
All this because Loki desires a throne.
It is my birthright.
Your birthright was to die!
When we tackle this film, we have a tough time imagining Thor without Loki, because they are so much, the Batman to the Joker. You need that mirror reflection. And I mean that for Loki too. I mean, Loki just by himself, yes, he can go off and do things, but there's something drastically missing if Thor's not there to kind of shine the light on his darkness.
We knew Loki was going to be an important part of it because that brother relationship is one of the main engines of the Thor movies.
You're so brilliant, Loki. Why haven't you figured it out?
Take off these shackles and I will.
Think I'm a fool?
Yes. Yes, I do.
When I first read a draft, he was not very much in the story, and I just, like a lot of people, am very drawn to him as a character. Tom's done such a great performance that we've always been aware of his vulnerability and the fact that he's evil, but also there's a conflict in him. And so I sort of started nudging him into the story more. We need to be true to just how unpredictable and perverse this character is, but we have to take him somewhere we haven't seen him before.
That was really exciting, sitting down with Alan as they were developing a script and saying, where do we go? And in order for the character to come back up, he had to hit rock bottom. And that really is where the idea of his initial incarceration came from. He starts in a prison, and he's furious about it because he's in a cell alongside all these other very unimportant Asgardian marauders, abandoned and forgotten, figuratively and literally buried from consciousness. He might as well be dead, and he knows it.
You know full well it was your actions that brought you here.
My actions. I was merely giving truth to the lie that I've been fed my entire life, that I was born to be a king. You read a script and it says, Loki's cell. In your mind, you have an idea of what that looks like. And then, of course, you come on set and it's immediately more specific. In my mind, it was sort of like a cylinder, and I was just at the bottom of it on my own. And then I walked in, and the set itself was amazing because the exterior of it is murky and dripping and dank and ancient, and you can sort of almost smell that there are evil, awful cosmic rats that lurk down there. But the cells themselves were these futuristic boxes of white light, which sort of plays into this idea that Asgard is light years ahead of Earth in its technology. Odin continues to bring me new friends. How thoughtful.
So while Loki was sentenced really for eternity in the dungeons, Thor needs to go clean up the mess that Loki has started. Loki has, whether on purpose or just by inspiring the marauders, the sort of dregs of the universe, to go try similar coups around the galaxy.
The Bifrost having been destroyed has really allowed the criminals of the universe to
to wreak havoc. And so they've been doing some sort of peacekeeping.
We had to create a race of marauders, which were sort of all-purpose bad guys, and that was very collaborative. Our costume person was working on it, our concept artists were working on it.
We have quite a rich color palette with marauders, where we got browns to greens to reds to vivid colors. And we have a character who's kind of the horn marauder, and his horns are literally, 2 feet out here. They're massive. He's got teeth, he's got contact lenses. There's a serious prosthetic, about 4 hours in prosthetics. We have a few of those kind of characters, and some of them are less involved, but they're all different, they're all off-world, and they're all crazy.
Vanaheim is Hogan's home planet, and it was stunning. Even under all the chaos and all the bombs going off and all the, horses and everything, it was a beautiful, beautiful area. We shot it outside of London.
I kind of came in and said, okay, I want to make him more dynamic. A lot of the time we have seen him in the past, I think, fighting hand-to-hand combat like a Viking, which has an element of his style, but we needed to embrace that he had far more advanced skills than that. The guy can fly and split the earth in half with his weapon. So developing different ways to use the hammer and not always using the hammer, with the idea of getting him off the ground a lot more and, more wire work.
It was a month of fight training and horseback riding, just a tremendous amount of fun.
I had a lot more stunt training in this film than I did in the first movie. Lots of shield and sword training, obviously, and then I have a double-bladed spear. She likes to keep people on their toes,
The hardest thing is to try and get some semblance of how it's going to feel, because you can't practice straight away with that armor. Even though you're in sort of like, gym slacks and a t-shirt, you kind of you've got this exaggerated movements, because you know full well you can't dance around like a ballerina, because as soon as you put this on, all those moves won't work.
We rehearsed over on location to start with, because with Alan it was like trying to give him the layout and using all the village for us. We walk it through, that's how we sort of work it out, and we just keep rehearsing.
For the first time since Bifrost was destroyed, the 9 realms are at peace. They're well reminded of our strength, and you have earned their respect and my gratitude.
Thank you. I'm imagining that forever Thor's story will be split between Asgard and the 9 realms and also Earth. Part of the challenge is to balance his godliness and the kind of humanity that we feel in him, so the story will always revolve tightly around Midgard.
It's really fun to get to come back and play Jane again. I think it's rare to get the opportunity to play female scientists.
We're always coming from the point of view of how would an astrophysicist see these amazing events happening.
It's fun to see all the characters back together and how they've all changed. Like, Selvig's gone crazy now because of what happened with Loki and the Avengers.
Seeing Stellan play a character whose mind has been somewhat torn asunder, and yet he's still correct about the things he's trying to do, and it causes him to take his pants off a lot.
I did a lot of prep by being naked at home a lot to see if I could do it, and I could.
And the first one is that real fish out of water quality with Thor on Earth, which played so well.
The natural thing to do seemed to be to reverse that, take a human up into the 9 realms and into Asgard.
I was really happy about Jane going to Asgard. We have to do that again. It's such a grand scale, and it really feels sort of operatic when you see just how large everything is.
Alan wanted to expand our sense of the world. He wanted to sort of deepen and shade it. This is the race that the Vikings worshipped.
There's a sort of medieval feel, but there's also a science fiction kind of quality to it.
We're trying to make sure that the medieval doesn't overwhelm, and that there's a big dollop of tech in everything, because the whole idea is that the Asgardians aren't really supernatural. They have this extraordinary technology which would seem to us to be magic.
That's a quantum field generator, isn't it?
It's a soul forge.
Does the soul forge transfer molecular energy from one place to another?
Yes.
It's great. It does feel like a place that exists as opposed to a set. There's a worn quality to set. It looks like it's been lived in. And a lot of the sets were built outdoors, so we could use natural lighting as opposed to the indoor studio look.
It really feels like we get to be in Asgard on the outside. It's not all CGI. I mean, they've just done a fantastic job. Every little detail. I mean, even on the tiles on the floor, it's the most intricate details you've ever seen.
The Medina set was sort of the most historic part of this film. You know, we're trying to say that that's nestled into the mountains of Asgard and has been around there for certainly hundreds, if not thousands of years. And that was just simply a world where we wanted to mix an ancient architecture, or certainly an earlier architecture, into something as the city grows above us. It becomes much more modern and futuristic.
Any chance that we could allow to have any vegetation or any animals, birds, horses, we felt like in the first one we didn't feel how Asgard lived, and in this one we tried to make sure that we give you that feeling of a full-on city.
We wanted to be true to the idea, both within the Marvel universe and within Norse mythology, that Asgard was a golden city, a throne room. It needed to be beautiful. We needed to be able to get a lot of light in there. It also needed to act as one of the biggest environments in the film for this spectacular kind of crash from this elf ship which charges into it. So there were a lot of engineering issues with it about how this ship cuts through the columns.
My first day's filming was me destroying Odin's throne. There's a vast, cavernous hall. When you see a set like that, or you see a set like this, you realize that your performance has got to dominate that scale, you know, otherwise you're gonna get lost. It needs high definition performing to leap out of a set like this.
Stand down, creature.
Thor's mother and Loki's mother, Frigga, played by Rene Russo, has a much bigger part in this film.
Who are you?
I am Malekith, and I would have what is mine. Where is the Aether?
I'll never tell you.
I believe you.
We were looking for a scenario in which we could put Thor and Loki together. That we needed Thor to go ask for Loki's help, and we needed Loki to agree to that help. We realized early on, killing Frigga would be the way to do that, would be able to bond those brothers. But more than that, we wanted Loki to feel a sense of responsibility for his mother's death. When Curse is breaking out all of the other prisoners to wreak havoc during the attack on Asgard, he comes and he sizes up Loki, and even Curse realizes, I'm not gonna let this guy out. This guy's trouble. And as Curse starts to walk away, Loki shows that he is trouble.
You might want to take the stairs to the left.
Curse does that, and of course, ultimately ends up killing Frigga.
Loki's indirect responsibility for the downfall of Asgard, his secondary aiding of the Dark Elves and Curse, breaks him. And now Thor needs Loki because he needs to find Svartalheim, he needs to find the Dark Elves, and he appeals to Loki's need for vengeance. He needs to avenge the death of his mother.
You help me escape Asgard, and I will grant it to you. Vengeance and afterward this cell.
Loki's the only person with the key to the back door, essentially. And this dramatic event gives them a chance to escape.
We knew that we wanted Loki to be more ambiguous in this movie. In the Avengers, we wanted him to be the pure villain. In the Dark World, we want it to be a much more complex relationship.
There's probably an element where Thor and Loki were in the very first film, the beginning, when they were brothers, you know, and there was that friendship, or sort of, there was a less hatred involved. There is, I think, we get to a place where there's more of that this time around, you know? And also, Thor gets to really ask Loki, what do you want? You know, what's this about? What, like, why? How did we get here? And also apologize. Yeah, okay, I maybe played a part in that, but, you know, I think he's able to confront Loki and say it's about time that you kind of recognize your role in this.
What help were you in your cell? Who put me there? Who put me there? You know damn well. You know damn well who. She wouldn't want us to fight.
Well, she wouldn't exactly be shocked.
So we decided we needed to bring in a bad guy. We needed to bring in a guy who was so bad that it would force Thor and Loki to need to team up, and that's where Malekith came in.
You know, suddenly Thor and Loki are bound together on the same journey, going up against Malekith with the same goal, but completely different ways of going about it.
Malekith's backstory goes back at least 5,000 years. He's an ancient villain with a very, very big chip on his shoulder.
He has almost a godlike status among the elves, and he is a slippery character, even in the audition talking to Alan. I thought, how do we make him more interesting than just a cackling fiend? And it was Alan's sensibility and the way we spoke together about the project that made me feel we could perhaps give Malekith some complexity, because that's what the audience demand.
He came to conquer our world and found it already dead by my hand.
But the whole world that they've created for the Dark Elves, from the sets and even the locations, you know, shooting out at Iceland, just there's an epic feel to it.
This Thor is called the Dark World, and that is the world of the Dark Elves, and we needed to find a place that could fill that role, and Iceland, with its black volcanic sand and its amazing landscapes, is doing that for us.
This is the world of Svartalheim, and just a moment ago we shot the scene where the Dark Elves first returned home and took deep breaths of poisoned air.
We've scoured the earth to try and find the right spot where we could dress the things that we need to dress on top of a real location. Having the bones there is the most important thing. Getting out and actually being on location, shooting there is the key.
In Iceland, you get such scale. You get purple skies. You were shooting on a volcanic lava field. It looks like another planet. It's bigger than your imagination. It's a good place for elves to be from.
We were incredibly lucky that when we went to Iceland, it was very windy. And although it's difficult to shoot with wind, but then you have proper wind that you can have in such a remote location, which is very difficult to bring any of these fans there. So Mother Nature gives you the wind, which 100% it allows you to believe that what's happening is there, because you would presume to have that kind of wind there.
You know this planet of yours is going to get us killed.
Possibly. For Thor, there's this question of trust. Can Thor trust Loki? But Thor is in a desperate place, so he is forced to trust him. And first example of that is when he takes off the cuffs. So we think that's it. Loki betrays him. And that, of course, in and of itself becomes a trick just for Malekith. And we realize they were working together.
Both characters, Thor and Loki, are exposed for who they really are. And I think they surprise each other. Loki probably, in his heart, wants to be worthy. And the way he achieves that worthiness, the way he achieves his redemption, his salvation, is to ultimately sacrifice himself for Thor and for Jane. He goes down with the ship. It's, I hope, a very cathartic and moving moment by saving his brother's life and avenging his mother's death.
Loki seemingly sacrifices himself to help save Thor. We think he's wounded, but it wasn't a death blow for the powerful Asgardian.
I'll tell Father what you did here today.
I didn't do it for him.
Thor now is heading into a battle with Malekith, the person who killed his mother, the person that Thor believes, at least, is responsible for the death of his brother. And Thor has all of that rage and all of that motivation going into our final battle.
Malekith!
Sometimes going huge in spectacle is different than going huge in concept. But we wanted to do something interesting, something that haven't been seen before, a battle that ties into the story. We came up with the idea that Thor and Malekith are fighting through portals and going from London to Svartalheim. I think it's interesting visually.
It's almost like this energy suction point that you go from one world to the other. And we bring some wonderful characters from the first one. The gigantic beast that comes out that then eats one of the elves.
By turning the battlefield upside down in such a way, it gave this film a very unique voice in the end.
How do I get to Greenwich?
Take this train, 3 stops.
How can we outsmart ourselves to make sure that we keep it fresh and new and renewed of something different? And I think the Aether becoming its own element of danger. I think that what we created with Malekith, when he actually does possess the Aether and how he throws it and what he creates this shards of knives, and it looks really dangerous. And if it were to get you, it will slash you. And that's something that it was a little different too, that we wanted to try. It could look at something almost ethereal and mystical and beautiful, and yet as dangerous as the most deadly weapon.
There's so many pieces in the puzzle and so many different sections and departments and what have you, that everyone's doing their bit, and that's such a satisfying thing when it comes together and it works, and it is what you thought it was going to be and hoped it would be.
The Aether cannot be destroyed.
But you can.
Thor returns to Asgard and realizes what he wants. He doesn't want to be king. He doesn't want to be on the throne.
Loki, for all his grave imbalance, understood rule as I know I never will. The brutality, the sacrifice, it changes you. I'd rather be a good man than a great king.
Go, my son.
Thank you, Father.
We're left at the end of this movie with the two brothers, both achieving essentially what they want. Thor realizing he wants to be with the Avengers. He wants to be with Jane. He wants to see what it would be like to be protector of this world. He's not meant to lead from sitting on top of the universe. And Loki, who always wanted to sit on that throne, is doing just that.
No. Thank you. The really exciting thing about the world of Thor is you have at the center of it a man who is wrestling with his identity. He's arguing with his father. He has a very complicated relationship with his brother, which is where I come in. And he has a woman he loves. And I think all of the characters within that landscape are infused with a humanity, and a humanity that seems to reflect our own. And then alongside it, you have fantastic explosions and action set pieces that are intrinsically cinematic. They thrill you and they excite you, and that's why we all love the movies, is because it's like magic. And that's why we're all doing it, is for that magic moment.
We started this journey 3 years ago, and to be here now with this kind of affection and following is a dream.
It's got this gigantic cosmic scope. It's a movie that takes place on all these other worlds and realms, and yet it's really about family and about these two brothers.
We have to, as filmmakers, delve deeper into their characters and tell stories that are not easy for them, that there's a lot of obstacles.
It's a complicated family, the family of Asgard. Thor, Loki, Odin, Frigga. They've got some differences to resolve. And the fact that there are people who love these characters, love these films, I mean, it's a privilege and a pleasure.